London, 1918. The First World War is coming to a close, and Dr. Jonathan Reed returns home to visit his sickly mother. When he enters the city, he's assaulted by the scent of decay. It's dark, rats fill the streets, and the citizens hide away in fear and misery. So absolutely nothing has changed. Boom, roasted. Greetings, gamers. My name is Kamikaze, and Vampyr is an RPG about a completely normal British city, and also vampires. It was released in 2018 by Don't Nod, developers of Remember Me, Bet You Don't, and Life is Strange, and God, why do they name their games things that are so easy to clown on? Anyway, Vampyr is actually pretty neat. It is a game that very obviously came out one AAA development cycle after Bloodborne, and the whole game, it feels very much like if BioWare made that game. That is to say that the combat is jankier, there are dialogue trees, and it has absolutely no subtlety whatsoever. I'm not saying Bloodborne is particularly subtle once things start getting tentacly, but at least it doesn't have any books written by Carl Eldritch. That's not a joke, there's a collectible note you can pick up in Vampyr written by Carl Eldritch. Despite that, I actually like this game. It certainly isn't perfect, but it has some pretty neat mechanics that I have never seen before. So, you play as Dr. Jonathan Reed, a doctor turned army medic in the First World War who is just returning from service. He arrives and is walking down the street when he is grabbed and bitten on the neck by a vampire. Thinking he's dead, some guys grab him and throw him into a mass grave, but aha! Being bitten by a vampire turns you into a vampire, so Jonathan is fine. He wakes up and starts stumbling around, but is overwhelmed by his thirst for blood. Unfortunately, this just happens to be when his poor sister Mary is walking around looking for him, and chomp.
What have you done? Mary! Oh, no. Mary!
Jonathan is horrified, completely devastated by what he's done. His poor sister, dead and gone, and now his motivation is to find the vampire who turned him and get revenge for his slain sister. And wait a second, didn't we literally just establish in the previous cutscene that being bit by a vampire turns you into a vampire? Yes, we did. So is she going to turn up and be a boss fight halfway through the game? Of course she is. Anyway, the distraught Jonathan kills some guards and then follows a blood trail to a bar where he meets some local patrons, and thus we have dialogue trees.
Has anybody entered the bar recently?
Can't say. Sorry. I spent the night making love to that gorgeous bottle, see?
The dialogue in this game is atrocious.
I'm cheap and I'm clean, I promise. Don't be shy, handsome. What can Christina do for you?
I'm not looking for what you're selling. But I'd like to ask you a few questions, if I may. I'm a doctor. Dr. Reed.
All right then, but be quick, though I usually get paid when I open my mouth.
There's this bit from an old Zero Punctuation episode where Yahtzee makes fun of dialogue trees by saying how unnatural they are because every option given to the player is basically, tell me more about this thing. Tell me more about vampires. Tell me more about yourself. Tell me more about London, etc., etc. And I always think of this bit when a game has dialogue trees, so I absolutely snorted my tea and crumpets when literally the second option I picked was,
Tell me more about these murders.
These blokes are rather unhelpful though, so you go upstairs and you meet Dr. Swansea, who is weird, and also not very helpful beyond reaffirming to Jonathan that he is indeed a vampire. You carry on following the blood trail for a bit until you track it to an old warehouse where an aggressively Irish man is being drunk dry by a skull, which is the game's stupid name for a ghoul.
Will you please stop?
This creature is bedeviled. I must put it down.
You beat him up, save the priest, and surprise, it's Dr. Swansea. He used you as bait. Jonathan is surprisingly quite understanding though, and when Dr. Swansea offers him a job at his hospital, he accepts. Thus, you get on Swansea's boat and you sail down the Thames to the Pembroke Hospital. This intro is not great, but it does the job of getting you to the interesting stuff. You reach the Pembroke, and Dr. Swansea is immediately called off to look at some dude, and Johnny's left to wander, and he instantly finds somebody getting stabbed.
You can do better than that. Nah, it's my turn.
Ooh, he answered the bell though, didn't he? So Jonathan goes over to the guy and is like, geez, that looks very painful. Very lucky, I'm a doctor though. And the guy is a complete jerk. And this is where the game introduces you to its unique central mechanic. The citizen menu. Get it? Like a menu that you eat from? Haha, we are very clever. Every single person that you meet in this game, human at least, can be eaten. Even story-critical NPCs. They give you a fat chunk of XP, which is increased even more if you engage in their dialogue or side quests. And then changing this even more is the district disease system. This game takes place in 1918, when the Spanish flu was ripping through London. The city is split up into 4 districts, and each one tracks the health of its citizens. If a lot of people are sick, bad stuff will start to go down. And in theory, these are some really cool ideas, especially the citizen menu, because I am a sucker for interesting moral dilemmas. It actually reminds me a bit of the Nemesis system from Shadow of Mordor, but not quite as dynamic. In practice, though, there is a big problem with it. I'll tell you why, but I have to explain the gameplay first. The game is Bloodborne. I mean, sure, you're a vampire, but it's Bloodborne. You've got light attack, heavy attack, stamina bar, you can't block, and you've got a quick sidestep instead of a roll. The main differences are that instead of a trick weapon, you have vampire powers, and instead of a gun, you have a gun. Vampire powers really are the attempt at a big shake-up. You spend XP to level up your stats, or to unlock and upgrade these cool vampire powers. Once ready, you use blood as a resource to cast them, which, side note, I don't know why a vampire is throwing away blood, but whatever. The powers are pretty cool. There's some offensive ones and defensive, and you can have 4 equipped at a time, which does give you some nice variety in combat. But now that I've explained that, the fatal flaw with this game is that it is too easy. I usually don't like to complain about the difficulty of games. Challenging or chill, I can appreciate all sides of the spectrum. But in this specific case, the main gimmick of the game is directly tied to the difficulty. You can kill the civilians you're ostensibly there to save in order to gain a huge chunk of XP and levels, thus making the combat easier. But since the game is already easy, why would I ever do that? Unless I feel like being a complete monster, which I usually don't. I feel I should say I played on medium. I feel I'm usually a pretty dedicated medium gamer, and not knowing the central gimmick, it just felt like what I should go with. Now, I could play the game again on hard, which might fix this somewhat, but the thing is that the actual mechanics weren't very hard. It's pretty easy to just not get hit by spamming the dodge button, so playing on hard would probably just make fights longer, which sounds kind of boring. And while I did like the game, I don't know if I liked it enough for another 30-hour playthrough. And you know, this game is a bit confusing to me, because it has janky gameplay, terrible dialogue, a predictable plot, the main mechanic doesn't really land, and yet despite all of that, I really like this game. Maybe I just admire it for taking a lot of risks and trying to be something bigger than it had any right to be. And it also helps, I guess, that the characters are not bad. Jonathan is a huge dork, but in a kind of endearing way, and all the people you meet out and about are actual characters for the most part. They have their own backstories and motivations and problems, and a lot of the voice acting in this game is actually really good.
Where were you stationed, sir? Did you serve for long?
I really don't want to talk about all this shit.
No offense. I was pushing too much. I served in France myself. I just wanted to know what happened to you.
You were an officer, weren't you? Then I doubt we fought the same war, sir. No offense.
While they're not all super deep, they're at least compelling enough that I don't want to eat most of them for no reason. So, you know, they did their job. So that's Vampyr. Vampyr. It's a really ambitious RPG that didn't quite have the budget to pull off what it wanted to go for. But it's kind of charming in its own way because of that, I think. Seriously though, here's to Vampyr the Masquerade 2 pulling off what this game tried to. If you played the game before, leave me a comment, let me know what you thought. But if you've never played it, I think it's worth a shot if you're looking for something to do with your time. Anyway, if you could subscribe to my channel, I think that would be just swell, and that does it for me. I've got some big videos I've been working on. So this one's a little bit shorter, but I'm going to get back to working on those now. Goodbye.